Part 66. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 652. Princess's Mansion. Although Prince Fu's fiefdom was outside the capital, the relationship between Prince Fu and Emperor Chen was harmonious. Prince Fu would be recalled to the capital from time to time. In the past 2 years, Emperor Chen kept him in the capital for convenience. It was inconvenient to build another one in the capital. Prince Fu's mansion, Prince Fu and Princess Fu live in Anyang Princess Mansion. During lunchtime, Prince Fu took a bite of food for the princess and said, "Try this. This is something I asked the cook to learn. How does it taste?" After finishing the dishes, he saw Princess Anyang looking at him. After thinking for a while, Prince Fu also put some vegetables in her bowl and said, "Try it too, but don't taste too much. This is for your mother and concubine." Princess Anyang put down her chopsticks and said angrily, "My father only sees my mother and concubine, does he still have my daughter?" Prince Fu glanced at her and said calmly, "It doesn't matter whether you are in the eyes of my father, as long as you are in the eyes of your future commander." Princess Fu looked at Princess Anyang and said, "You said you are not young anymore. You are not satisfied with any of the candidates you are considering for the county horse. You should just tell me which young talent you have your eye on. Can't we just ask His Majesty for marriage? Young talents are all in name only, so don't mention it." Princess Anyang flirted with the topic, looked at Prince Fu, and said, "Father, I have something to ask you." "Do you need any money?" Prince Fu said without even looking at her. "If there is any banquet to be held, you have to figure it out on your own." "Does my father only have money in his eyes?" Princess Anyang glanced at him dissatisfied and said, "What I asked my father for this time is a serious matter." Royal Palace. Chen Huang had just played a game of chess with King Fu and won with one more piece. He was in a happy mood and walked out of the hall. He pointed at the square in front of the hall and said with a smile, "I still remember that back then, a few of us didn't study hard and ran out secretly. We were brawling in this square, and were discovered by the emperor and punished to kneel in the ancestral temple. Thanks to the chicken drumsticks you hid in your sleeves, the 2 of us survived that night, but the princes and brothers were in misery. I fainted from hunger in the middle of the night." King Fu took out a paper bag from his sleeve and opened it. There was a chicken drumstick in the paper bag. He took a bite himself, then handed it to Chen Huang and said, "Brother Huang, do you want a bite? Your habits are still the same as before." Chen Huang smiled, took the chicken leg, took a bite, and said, "It still tastes the same as before." King Fu touched his bulging belly and said with a smile, "After all these years, I still like this bite." Yes, so many years have passed in such a flash. Emperor Chen looked at the sky outside the palace and said, "Is the death anniversary of the second brother Wan coming soon?" King Fu thought for a moment, nodded and said, "There's still half a month." When I looked at the square in front of me, I felt like I had seen the scenes of us laughing and playing when we were children, and seeing several dead royal brothers. Emperor Chen looked at the square in front of him, silent for a moment, and then said after a long time, "Say, it would be great if the king brothers are still here. We can play chess and take a walk in our free time. I think my father will be happy under Jiquan." Prince Fu lowered his head, sighed lightly, and said nothing. Emperor Chen looked away, sighed, and said, "I am worried that my princes will follow the same path as several princes. Is this destined to be something that the royal family cannot escape, destiny?" Prince Fu smiled and said, "Brother, you are worrying too much. These princes are of pure nature." "Pure and good-natured," Emperor Chen snorted coldly and said, "I don't believe what you say. Do you believe it or not? If I let Cheng'er return to the fiefdom now, within half a year, he would die in Shuo due to acclimatization." "State." Prince Fu showed embarrassment on his face and said, "King Huai and Prince Run are both gentle in temperament. Chen Huangdao, Ruier has been like that since he was a child. He is lukewarm towards everything. Yuen'er is still young, and with concubine Shu teaching by his side, he has a pure heart. I am very relieved. I hope he can always be like this. King Fu saw that Chen Wang's face was gloomy. He knew that the mention of the past reminded him of some bad events from decades ago, so he changed the subject and said, "There are some new things happening in Beijing these days." Emperor Chen didn't want to bring up the past anymore, so he asked instead, "What happened?" Prince Fu smiled and said, "Most of the generals' children in Beijing have gone to the northwest. During the martial arts competition this time, some generals' women are also clamoring to imitate their ancestors, make contributions, and go into battle to kill the enemy." Chen Huang waved his hand and said, "They are fooling around, let them do it. Fighting is a man's business, it is not women's turn to rush to the front." Prince Fu smiled and said, "My brother feels the same way." Princess's mansion. Prince Fu looked at Princess Anyang, spread his hands and said, "Your Majesty does not agree." Princess Anyang looked at him and said, "Father, did you ask?" "Of course I asked, can my father still lie to you?" Prince Fu glanced at her and said, "Don't get involved in this matter." Princess Anyang gritted her teeth and said, "I don't believe it anymore. I can definitely do what he can't do." King Fu asked, "What did you say?" "It's nothing." Princess Anyang waved to him and said, "I'm going out for a while. You don't have to wait for me to have dinner tonight." Capital, Yang Mansion. The Yang family was not prominent among the dignitaries of the capital. No one in the family was in the military or politics. The population was declining, and they were considered a noble in extreme decline. Even if he fell to this point, even the top generals in Beijing would not dare to make trouble in front of the Yang family. Nobles with a little experience know that the Yang family has once been glorious. Decades ago, all the men of the Yang family died on the battlefield, and a generation of generals has been cut off since then. Even so, the Yang family has also, without flinching, with no men left, the Yang family's women stepped forward and charged on the battlefield, as brave as their men. The Yang family's female generals once occupied the position of general. At that time, it was these female generals who supported the entire country. Even decades later, they are still remembered by people. The late emperor treated them respectfully when he was still alive, not to mention those who enjoy their shadow in the capital. Junior. Today, at the door of Yang Mansion, which has always been neglected, a luxurious carriage slowly stopped. Princess Anyang jumped down from the carriage, walked up and knocked on the door. After a long time, an old woman slowly opened the door. When she saw her, the wrinkles on her face piled up and she said with a smile, "Princess came here to accompany the general again." Less than half an hour later, Princess Anyang came out of Yang's house with a smile on her face and said, "Go to Zhao's house." There are many families that have been as glorious as the Yang family, and the Zhao family is one of them. Royal Palace. The guards at the palace gate were on duty when 3 carriages suddenly stopped at the palace gate. 3 gray-haired old women carefully got out of the carriage with the help of servants. When the guards saw these 3 old women, their eyes widened at the same time. It was the first time for them to meet the 3 old women, but the clothes they wore had already revealed their identities. These are the only ancestors in the capital who are even treated politely by His Majesty. An old woman walked to the palace gate, looked at the guard, and said, "We want to see His Majesty." Royal Study Room. Emperor Chen threw a letter aside, shook his head and said, "They are fooling around, and these censors are also fooling around. If the Chen kingdom needs women to go to the battlefield, where will I put my face?" He looked at Wei Jian and said, "Tell Shang Shisheng that there is no need to send such discounts to me in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, a young eunuch hurried in from outside, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, 3 old generals from the Yang family, Zhao family, and Qi family want to see you." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked in surprise, "Are there these old generals in the capital?" We old immortals are really old, so old that even His Majesty has forgotten. An old voice came from the door of the palace. Emperor Chen looked at the three old women who appeared at the door of the royal study. After a moment of surprise, he immediately stepped forward and said, "Why are the three old people here? Come, please give me a seat quickly." After the three of them sat down, an old woman looked at Emperor Chen and said, "We just heard that His Majesty looks down on the women of my generals, thinking that they are inferior to men on the battlefield, and does not allow them to participate in martial arts. Is this true?" Chen Wang's expression was startled. He could say this to anyone, but not to these three, and he was not qualified to say it to them. Hearsay, this is definitely hearsay. Emperor Chen's expression changed, he looked at the three of them, and said, "Who said women are inferior to men? Without heroes among women like these three, there would be no Chen kingdom today. How could I look down on it? Woman." He picked up a memorial from the table and said with a smile, "I was about to agree to the censor's proposal when three old men came over. Wei Jian, go and give this memorial to King Huai and ask him to arrange it immediately." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 653. After personally seeing off the three successors of Chen Guo, Emperor Chen returned to the imperial study, sat back in his seat, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Pinshu Mobile Terminal M. In terms of qualifications and military exploits, although these three are women, they are not inferior to any of the old generals in the general section. The three of them are one of the few remaining people who have achieved great results in an era. In order to keep the enemy out of the pass, all the loyal members of the Yang family died on the battlefield, leaving them alone, unmarried and devoted to the family. For such people, no matter how great the honor given to them by the court is, they will not be too much. They are real heroines. Even if he is the emperor, he will not ignore the feelings of these people unless he wants to be poked in the back by the world. However, this was contrary to his original intention. Emperor Chen picked up a memorial and said a little depressed, "These women, when they are not at home doing embroidery, they have to go to the battlefield to do something. The swords have no eyes. They think the battlefield is fun." Wei Jian stood behind him and said with a smile, "Your Majesty should be happy. The men of the generals are not afraid of death, and the women are not inferior to men. The common people send their strong men into the army. Chen Guo is united. No matter how powerful it is, isn't it a good thing that the enemy can be defeated?" "What you said makes sense." Emperor Chen nodded and said with some relief, "If the whole country can unite as one, why should we be afraid of the grasslands and the western regions?" He looked at Wei Jian and said, "In this case, we might as well set up a separate martial arts competition for women. The candidates are not limited to generals. Anyone with a clean family can take the exam. In this way, no one will say that I am biased towards generals." Wei Jian smiled and said, "Your Majesty is wise. True fragrance is indeed one of the three major essences of human beings." Emperor Chen also stated firmly yesterday that the men of Chen state will not die and will not let women fight on the battlefield. Today, he ordered King Huai to set up a separate martial arts competition for women and supervise it as soon as possible. It may be rare for a woman to serve as a general on the battlefield in other places, but there is a precedent for this in Chen state. Decades ago, when the Chen kingdom was invaded by foreign enemies and almost destroyed, these heroines stood up and dedicated their youth and blood to save the situation. Since then, the status of women in the capital, especially those in generals, has greatly improved. Amplitude increase. This is also the reason why there are still witches like Tang Shui and Lu Ya in the capital when the concept of male superiority and female inferiority is still the mainstream. Who dares to look down on a female general will be poked in the back by everyone. Without a generation of female generals who shed their blood, how could they have the stability they enjoy now? To this day, folk dramas about female generals still exist, and the image of the heroine frequently appears in popular artworks in the market. This is a unique feature of Chen Guo. Although Chen Huang has character flaws, he is still qualified and open-minded to be an emperor. The Chen state had had female generals before, but this was the first time that a female had taken up martial arts. This matter would definitely be criticized by the corrupt people among the people. It was impossible for him not to have considered this issue when he made this decree. However, no matter how many people criticize him, it is impossible to take back this kind of imperial edict that is announced to the world. In other words, Liu Ya can fight side by side with Xiaoju for at most half a year, which can be regarded as achieving his wish. Tang Ning mourned for King Huai for a moment in her heart. Women's martial arts competitions had never happened before. There was no precedent to follow or learn from. Everything had to be started from scratch. He had to be responsible for the martial arts competitions and supervise the competitions. Suddenly there were more this errand after this incident. He probably will have a profound understanding that it is better to just be a salted fish who doesn't have to worry about anything and doesn't have to do anything. The first round of the martial arts examination is almost over. In this round alone, most of the candidates will be eliminated. Each subsequent round will shorten the time significantly. Fortunately, Huang Chen didn't let him take responsibility for the martial arts examination. Tang Ning only had to come over every day, brush her face, and clock in on time to go home. Lord Tang, stay on the last day of the martial arts competition. Tang Ning had just walked out of the Zioki camp when a voice came from behind. Tang Ning turned around, looked at King Huai who was walking over, and asked, "Does your highness have anything else to do?" King Huai looked at him and asked with a smile, "Master Tang, are you busy recently?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "It's okay, not too busy." "It's better not to be too busy." King Huai smiled and said, "I have to be responsible for both the martial arts and martial arts competitions at the same time. Yesterday, my father made arrangements for the women's martial arts competition. However, I only have 2 hands, so I can't do this. How about leaving the matter of this woman's martial arts to Mr. Tang?" Tang Ning rubbed her ears and asked, "What did your highness just say?" King Huai repeated, "About women's martial arts." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "It's not this sentence, it's the previous sentence." King Huai thought for a while and said, "Master Tang has been busy recently." "Busy, very busy." Before King Huai could finish speaking, Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Things with the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Personnel, and the affairs of the Zioki camp, plus martial arts. I'm so busy that I can't even have time to have dinner with my wife." "None, your highness should find someone else." He was about to leave when King Huai grabbed his sleeve. King Huai looked at him and said, "Master Tang, I don't want to think about it anymore. There are many beautiful women among the generals." Tang Ning asked in surprise, "Your highness, what does this mean?" King Huai said, "Master Tang, aren't you planning to find the 5th and 6th ladies here?" King Huai said, "This too much. Is he, the dignified General Zhou Xiaoyi, such a casual person?" Tang Ning looked at him and counterattacked, "So it's the best thing for your highness to do. Your highness has been married for so long and doesn't have a son or a half. Why don't you consider having some concubines?" King Huai looked at him and said with a smile, "Master Tang has 4 wives, right? Dash dash. The reason Tang Ning doesn't have children is because he won't be able to stay in Chen country for long, and Xiao Ru Xiaoi and the others are too young, so he has no plans to do so until they settle down." King Huai was different. He had been married for so many years and still had no children. Maybe it was just because he was not good enough. "My father has given me the full authority to take charge of military affairs." King Huai looked at him and said, "This is an order." This salted fish actually used his power to suppress others. Tang Ning looked at him and said angrily, "You." King Huai raised his eyebrows, "Huh." Tang Ning took a deep breath, calmed down, and said with a smile, "If your highness really has something to hide, you might as well tell him straight away. I can cure young Master Xiao even if he can't harden himself. If His Highness Prince Huai can't give birth to a son, maybe there is a way. A passing captain stopped and asked in surprise, His Royal Highness, Prince Huai, can't you give birth to a son? Tang Ning was responsible for the women's martial arts competition, and the news that King Huai was unable to give birth to a son spread in the Zioqi camp at the same time. Tang Ning was naturally depressed because she had a troublesome thing that didn't belong to her for no reason. When she was walking home, Tang Yaoyao and Xiao Xiao came over. Tang Yajing looked at him and asked, I heard that women can also take the top prize in martial arts. Tang Ning looked at her expectant look and asked, what do you want to do? Tang Yaoyao said, I want to play. Xiao Xiao grabbed his arm and said, brother, I want to go too. Tang Ning was worried about this matter. Hearing this, he waved his hand and said, martial arts is not for you to play, so don't make trouble. Tang Yaoyao frowned, looked at him, and said, if you don't let us play, don't sleep with me in the future. Tang Yaoyao had already threatened her with this, so Tang Ning had no choice but to agree. I don't know which unscrupulous guy gave the advice to Emperor Chen. He was clearly worried that the world would not be in chaos. Princess Anyang, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, appeared in front of him and asked, how about it? Is there anything you can do about it? Tang Ning glanced at her and asked, what can I do? Princess Anyang said with some pride, I asked several old generals to go to the palace to persuade your majesty, and your majesty agreed to establish a women's martial arts competition. Tang Ning looked at her and said suddenly, so you are the one who is lacking. Princess Anyang raised her eyebrows and asked, what is missing? This book comes from pinches/html/book/47/47547/L. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 654. Tang Ning shook his head and said, nothing. He was not stupid. Princess Anyang had already proved that she was even more petty than himself. If Tang Ning said that she was immoral, wouldn't that offend her further? He had discovered from Zhao Man before that the women of the Zhao family were all unreasonable by nature. It was okay to ignore her. The more you pay attention to her, the more excited she will be. What's more terrible is that in this process, some things may go astray. For example, the two of them formed a deep revolutionary friendship in the struggle between you and me. They also began to discover countless shining points in Tang Ning, and then the fake enemy became a real enemy. Zhao Man fell step by step in this way. Of course, Tang Ning was not worried that Princess Anyang would be the same as Zhao Man. In the past, Zhao Man was just a little princess with a bit of temper, and she had not formed a complete outlook on life and values, but Princess Anyang was different. Tang Ning saw a strong desire for control in her. This kind of woman is destined to be superior to others, and the Tang family cannot tolerate her. Because Tang Ning had offended her before, her desire to win drove her to accomplish this thing that Tang Ning could not complete in exchange for her inner vanity. At this time, as long as she followed her steps, her vanity would be satisfied, and she would not continue to trouble him here. Tang Ning looked at Princess Anyang, cupped his hands, and said, if the princess was willing to come forward, His Majesty would have agreed long ago. My admiration for the princess is really like a surging river, continuous, and like the Yellow River flooding, it is out of control. Princess Anyang looked at him and said with a gloomy face, can you be more fake? From Princess Anyang, Tang Ning learned a truth, never offend women, because you don't know when they will retaliate. Tang Ning could have been free for a long time, but because of her desire to win, she had a lot of troubles. Emperor Chen has been in a high position for a long time, and he doesn't know that he only needs to open his mouth, while others need to run around. The cause of this incident was just that Liu Ya wanted to fight side by side with Xiaoju. Not all the women from military families in the capital wanted to abandon the comfortable life in the capital and go to the front to fight for the country like men. Moreover, not all women from military families were like her, who were familiar with military books and had good martial arts. For those lonely military families with few men and no male offspring, this imperial edict gave them hope of family continuation. In addition, there were some martial arts families in Chen State, which could let the women in their families try and win a brilliant future for the family. And all this would take time. The martial arts examination had already begun. Even if Tang Ning used the fastest speed to notify all the prefectures in the country, the local governments would review the qualifications and send people to the capital. It would take several months or even half a year. At that time, it was the time for the provincial examination. There should not be many women who met the requirements of the martial arts examination, so there was no need to arrange a complicated process. It would take 10 days and half a month to go from the preliminary selection to the finals. After all, this was the first time, and all the rules were untraceable. What he said was what it was. Tang Yao Yao and Xiao Xiao insisted on joining in the fun, and Tang Ning had no choice. If they wanted to play, let them go up and play. Tang Ning naturally could not let them go to the northwest. Arranging them to stop in the finals was also an explanation to them. In the following time, Tang Ning was extremely busy. The affairs of the Ministry of Works were actually the top priority. It was not easy to build the 10,000 heavy cavalry that Emperor Chen wanted in the fastest time. The training of Zhou Xiaoyi, the trivial matters of the Ministry of Personnel, and the preparations for the women's martial arts examination occupied a large part of his energy. When Tang Ning finally arranged everything on track, he found that the new year was just around the corner. The past few months have been quite peaceful. The civil and military examinations in Jiangxi province have not unexpectedly ended successfully, but the officials in charge have not been idle, because the state examinations have not ended long ago, and the provincial examinations will come again in early March next year. The court is also long lost and calm. Since King Kong was dismissed, he has lived in seclusion and has not seen outsiders. It seems that he has really given up on life. There are often rumors in the capital that someone saw King Kong drinking alone in a remote tavern at night, and he returned drunk before curfew. People are always forgetful. A few months ago, King Kong and King Duan were still the hot topics of the people in the capital. A few months later, King Kong completely disappeared from their mouths. Occasionally, someone mentioned him, but they just sighed and the topic shifted to other places. As the victor, King Duan did not seem to be as powerful as everyone thought. Generally speaking, before the emperor established the prince, he would first let him establish his merits and make some achievements for the court officials and the people, so that he could legitimately ascend to the throne of the East Palace. However, in the past few months, Prince Duan seemed to be intentionally marginalized by Emperor Chen. The things he handled were all insignificant. On the contrary, Prince Huai, who had always had a weak sense of presence, successfully completed several major tasks assigned by Emperor Chen. He was commended by Emperor Chen in person in the court and received many rewards. Everyone's eyes were on these adult princes, and they naturally didn't know that Prince Run Zhaoyuan had mastered the recipes of more than 20 soups, and his skill in making soups was comparable to that of the imperial chefs in the palace. Tang Ning had nothing to teach him about soup. Zhaoyuan, who had lost weight, stood at the door, waved to Tang Ning, and said, "Sir, I'm going back to the palace, otherwise my father will be waiting anxiously." Tang Ning watched him leave and turned back. These days, Emperor Chen's taste has been spoiled by Zhaoyuan, so that after reviewing the memorials every day, he will drink a soup cooked by him before falling asleep. It only takes 21 days for a person to develop a habit. Emperor Chen's habit of drinking soup has been far more than 21 days. For him who lives a monotonous life, this has become a part of his life. Compared with the capital, the northwest seems less peaceful. West of Shazhu, outside Yumen Pass, several small countries in the western regions that originally existed have all been returned to Zioan. So far, at least one-third of the entire western regions have fallen into the hands of Zioan. Zioan is adjacent to the west of Chen State, and now it has become Chen's second largest enemy after the grassland. In the past few months, there have been constant frictions at the border, but no major conflicts have occurred. The rise of Zioan is very strange. It was originally just a small country in the western regions with a population of only a few thousand, but in the past 2 years, or to be precise, in the past year, it has swept across the western regions with an unmatched attitude and has become the largest overlord in the western regions today. Without accumulation, there will be no sudden burst. It is conceivable that in the long period of time before, this neglected country has been secretly enduring and growing. Compared with the western regions, the conflicts in the grasslands are much greater. After unification, although the Wanyan tribe did not go to war with the state of Chen, there were constant frictions of all sizes. In a few months, dozens of wars of all sizes broke out in the north. Emperor Chen invested a lot of resources in the north, with no shortage of food and military pay, and a steady stream of new troops. This was a rare period in the decades of friction between the state of Chen and the grasslands that not only did not suffer losses, but also occupied a great advantage. In these wars, some people's names began to shine. Ling Feng, Lu Tang, Lu Jun, these young generations of generals began to emerge on the battlefield, but the most popular one was Xiao Ju. During his time in the grassland, he led his troops to participate in more than 10 battles of varying sizes, and he always maintained an undefeated record, captured countless Sushan people, and had become the shadow of some small Sushan tribes. In the palace, Emperor Chen had been a little anxious since he reviewed the first few memorials, and he raised his head from time to time and looked towards the direction of the palace entrance. He picked up a memorial and put it down again, and finally couldn't help asking, "Is Yuan not here yet?" Wei Jian came over and said with a smile, "I just went to see it. His Highness just returned to the palace, and he should be here soon." Emperor Chen pursed his lips subconsciously, then stroked his already plump chin, and said, "I wonder what kind of soup he cooked today." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 655. Although the Chen state had a lot of twists and turns this year, with constant turmoil in the northwest, overall the treasury was sufficient and the situation was stable. It did not appear to be at a loss, but was able to handle it with ease. A few days ago, Emperor Chen generously gave year-end bonuses to all Chenguo officials. Although the amount was not large, only equivalent to 1 month's salary, this kind of honor was a great honor for most Chenguo officials. First time. The 100 million taels of silver in the inner palace is a very scary figure. Even a prodigal like Chen Huang will take many years to completely defeat him. In the past few months, Tang Ning has received a lot of news about Xiao Ju. This guy is thriving on the front line and has made many achievements. It is hard to imagine that young Master Xiao, who could not even be tough in the past, has now become an invincible general who scares Sushan's tribes. A few days ago, Tang Ning wrote a letter, and someone from the Ministry of War sent it to him. A tree that is beautiful in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. The better he performs, the more he will attract the enemy's attention. He must know how to restrain himself when it is time to restrain himself. After all, for him, it does not matter whether he has achieved meritorious service or not. Life is the most important thing. Important. Moreover, the reason why Xiao Ju was able to achieve such great achievements in a short period of time was because he did not encounter the main force of the Wanyan tribe. Their enemies were all the small tribes unified by the Wanyan tribe. What surprised Tang Ning was that the Wanyan tribe located deep in the grassland, for some unknown reason, had no reaction to Chen Chu's initiative to declare war, and just let the small tribes outside deal with it casually. Either they don't bother to deal with it, or they are held back by something and can't get away. Tang Ning had no way of verifying the reason, so she could only remind Xiaoju to be careful in sailing the 10,000-year ship, lest he get carried away and accidentally end the Xiao family. The new year was coming soon, and Tang Ning deliberately put aside some of the trivial matters she was doing, went out with them, and bought the New Year's goods herself. There are more people in the Tang family every year, and each year is more lively than the previous year. Tang Ning can even imagine what it will be like in 2 years. The real reunion of the family will be after leaving Beijing. Half of the original 3-year agreement has passed in the blink of an eye. During this period of time, Tang Ning never received a letter from Chu State, and the letters he sent himself were all ignored with no response. He only found out by chance a few days ago that Princess Changning of the Chu Kingdom personally led the troops on an expedition and had already gone to the grassland. Of course it was a lie that Tang Ning wasn't worried about her. If his wife wasn't worried, why should she worry about Xiaoju? But in comparison, Tang Ning believed in her strength more. The situation on the grassland is still under Chen Chu's control for the time being, but it is different in Beijing. After all, Prince Duan was Emperor Chen's favorite prince and his chosen candidate for the throne. Because of his previous arrogance, Emperor Chen had suppressed him for several months, but he could not keep suppressing him. The second year of Ding Yuan is about to pass. At the court meeting a few days ago, Emperor Chen handed over the upcoming civil examination to him. This was regarded as a re-enablement of him, and it also meant that past events could be forgotten. King Duan rose again, and King Kong kept a low profile during this period. Tang Ning once thought that King Kong stayed in the capital because he had some big plot, so he let the disciples of the beggar clan squat at the front and back gates of King Kang's mansion for 3 months. As soon as King Kong left the palace, Tang Ning knew where he had gone and who he had met. It's a pity that he didn't see anyone. He only drank alone and watched the theater alone. He didn't even have any entourage with him. Tang Ning could understand drinking to drown his sorrows. He had even lost his throne, so it would be too unkind to not allow him to drink. But Tang Ning couldn't understand it after watching the show. In the first month, King Kong went to Golan almost every day. Later, he seemed to find it too troublesome and simply bought a dozen actors. Then he didn't come out of the palace for 2 whole months. People will always do some inexplicable things after suffering a major blow. After Kong Wang was frustrated, he wanted to indulge himself. Tang Ning could understand it, but what he couldn't understand was that the actors that Kong Wang bought were all men, and he bought them back. Couldn't it be to learn acting from them? Of course, men is not impossible, and the possibility of King Kang's orientation changing is not ruled out. Tang Ning knew that some powerful people in Beijing had such a habit. When the imperial court did not allow officials to have sex with prostitutes, some people took advantage of the law. The law stipulated that sleeping with women was not allowed, but there was no rule against sleeping with men. At that time, Beijing, the trend of male prostitutes was prevalent among young people. Later, perhaps even the court could no longer stand it, so it relaxed restrictions on this matter. Over time, this trend was curbed. Tang Ning no longer struggled with the issue of Kong Wang's sexual orientation. She had this time, so she might as well comfort Zhao Yingying. She wanted to stay in the Tang family for the new year this year, but on New Year's Eve, as a princess who had not yet left the palace, she had to return to the palace. Basically, she would miss every occasion like this, and her heart was already filled with resentment. Tang Ning hugged her from behind and said with a smile, "When you are in the palace, if you see fireworks outside, you will know that I am thinking of you." While the gunpowder craftsmen in the firearms camp are committed to improving the power of gunpowder, they also do not forget to tinker with their own profession. The fireworks set off by the Tang family are the grandest and most beautiful in the entire capital, and can be seen no matter where in the capital. Zhao Man grabbed his hand and whispered, "At that time, I will miss you too." On New Year's Eve, when Tang Ning and the girls stood in the courtyard, looking at the fireworks in full bloom, the people in the capital were also attracted by this spectacular scene. Even in the deep palace, you can still see the fireworks outside. Zhao Man sat in his seat and looked up out of the window, with a smile on his lips and eyes full of joy. The princes headed by King Duan left the banquet and said some auspicious words to Emperor Chen and the Queen Mother, and each received some rewards. This is the annual practice. After that, it was time for the younger generation to toast to their elders or elder brothers. Although King Duan was the most respected prince, etiquette must not be messed up. He walked up to King Kong with some anxiety, picked up the wine glass, and said, "Brother Wang, I here's to you." When talking, he deliberately kept a distance from King Kong. The last time King Kong shook his hand and dropped the wine glass, his father ignored him for 3 months. He finally returned to the court, so he had to be careful about everything. A trace of fear appeared on King Kong's face, but he didn't look too frightened. He picked up the wine glass with trembling arms. Before holding it to the king, he hurriedly drank the wine in the glass and sat down immediately. King Duan looked at him and felt relieved, but also secretly happy. King Kong is no longer the King Kong he was before, and is no longer his opponent. He is so frightened just by seeing him. It seems that it is not impossible to save his life in the future. On New Year's Eve, there was no curfew in the capital, and the palace gates were not closed until very late. Emperor Chen was happy today and drank a few more glasses of wine. When he was a little tipsy, he came to Concubine Shu's palace and prepared to rest. Concubine Shu personally helped him take off his outer robe. Emperor Chen sighed as if without doubt and said, "I hope Ming'er can understand the meaning of my neglecting him during this period. Brothers and sisters are meant to support each other, not to kill each other of." As soon as he finished speaking, a young eunuch hurried in, his face extremely panicked, and he said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, something serious has happened. Today was a happy day." Emperor Chen looked at him, frowned and asked, "What's wrong?" The eunuch said in horror, "Kong, His Royal Highness King Kong has been assassinated." Chen Wang's body shook, his face changed drastically, and he lost his voice. "What did you say?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 656. Every festival such as Chinese Valentine's Day, Mid-Autumn Festival, New Year's Eve, and Shangyuan Festival, the imperial court would allow various departments to take 1 to 3 days off. However, local county offices, including Ping'an County Office and Jingzhou Office, such festivals are the busiest times. On ordinary days, there is a curfew in the capital. Ordinary people don't even dare to go out at night. If they are caught, the lightest punishment is a cane. Those who commit crimes and have evil intentions don't dare to go out to cause trouble. This makes it very easy for the government to maintain public security. But these festivals are different. The imperial court has cancelled the curfew. It is rare for the people to have an exciting nightlife. No matter what they have to do, they go out of their homes one after another. At this time, the streets and alleys of the capital and the cruise boats will be packed to the rafters. Bustling often means chaos. It is undeniable that most people go to the streets to have fun, but some people with evil intentions also find opportunities on days like this. Every important holiday, there are at least dozens of people in the capital reporting to the yamen for being stolen or robbed, and some major cases also happen from time to time. A year ago during the Lantern Festival, Tang Jing, the eldest son of the Tang family, was brutally murdered on Lantern Festival. The murderer has not been found yet. A year later, on New Year's Eve, King Kong was assassinated on his way back from the palace. His life was in danger. Emperor Chen very angry. During the Chinese New Year, Ping'an County Government, Jingzhou Government Office, Dali Temple, Ministry of Punishment, Yashitai, and several departments that were originally in Chiumu were all mobilized, and the capital was full of people looking for the murderer. Chen Huang even expressed angrily that once the murderer is caught, he will be punished immediately and will never tolerate it. Although the punishment of Lingqi was not abolished by Chen State, it was not used for a long time. This is a punishment that would only be used for the most heinous and heinous crimes. Wu Lihao's son was dead, and it could be revealed easily. The eldest son of the Tang family was dead, and the capital searched for the murderer for a while but failed, so it was left unsolved. But not this time. This is a matter of royal majesty and decency. He dares to kill King Kong today, King Duan tomorrow, and the emperor the day after tomorrow. Killing the emperor is rebellion. Rebels will kill the 9 tribes and suffer the punishment of Lingqi, which is not excessive at all. The assassination of a prince has never happened in the capital. Firstly, it is a capital crime and no one dares to commit it. Secondly, these princes have high status and will bring sufficient guards every time they go out, so no one can do it. King Kong is an exception among the princes. Since his downfall, his advisors have run away and his servants have dispersed. In the past few months, he has been walking alone, which just gave the thieves an opportunity to take advantage of. After King Kong was assassinated, he was immediately taken into the palace and looked after closely by the imperial physician. Zhao Man had just returned from a visit in the palace. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What's wrong with King Kong?" Zhao Man said, "The imperial doctor said that he almost hurt his lungs, but he lost too much blood, and his life is no longer in danger now. Prince Kong came out of the palace yesterday and when he returned to Prince Kang's mansion, he was stabbed by someone who rushed out from the dark. After the murderer hit him, he rushed into the crowd and disappeared. In anger, Emperor Chen ordered his people to kill the whole person. The capital turned around and wanted to find the murderer and execute him Lingqi. However, this murderer was obviously not an experienced hand. This knife just missed the vital point. If it had been moved an inch to the side, King Kong would have become King Kong." Zhao Man looked at him and asked with a pale face, "They all said that Brother Duan wanted to kill Brother Kong. Is it true?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "It's hard to say. Now that King Kong had nothing, what could he use to fight with King Duan? Logically speaking, King Duan did not need to kill everyone to leave an excuse for himself. When he comes to power, he can do whatever he wants with King Kong, there is no need to rush. But maybe, what if King Duan is such an impatient person and wants to avoid this trouble? However, it cannot be ruled out that this is a very expensive trick played by King Kong. People like them, who play tricks all day long, are cruel to others, and are also cruel to themselves. The fact that they stabbed themselves and brought down King Duan is also it's not that it can't be done. This is just Tang Ning's guess. As for what the inside story is, it depends on Chen Wang's investigation. Royal Palace, a certain hall. Concubine Zhang Xian sat by the bed, looked at the pale and bloodless King Kong, and asked worriedly, "How is my son?" A smile appeared on King Kang's face and he said, "Don't worry, mother and concubine. The imperial doctor said she won't die." Concubine Zhang Xian grabbed his hand, cried bitterly, and said sadly, "My son is already like this, what else do they want from you?" There were footsteps at the door, and Chen Huang walked slowly into the hall. Concubine Zhang Xian looked back, stood up, walked quickly to him, knelt down on the ground, and cried, "Your Majesty, I beg your Majesty, please let Cheng Er return to the fiefdom, he can no longer stay in the capital, I concubine I only have such a son, I can't watch him die." Huang Chen said with a sullen face, "Stupid, do you think he can survive if he goes to the fief? If he goes to the fief, he will only die faster." Concubine Zhang Xian's body trembled and she said sadly, "Your Majesty, please save Cheng Er, he is your son. You haven't slept all night. Go back to the palace and rest first." I will get to the bottom of this matter. Emperor Chen looked at the maid behind concubine Zhang Xian and said in a deep voice, why don't you help concubine Xian back to the palace? Yes. The two palace maids hurriedly helped concubine Zhang Xian out. Emperor Chen walked to the bed. Prince Kong struggled to stand up. Emperor Chen stepped forward quickly, helped him lie down, and said, you are injured, please don't worry. King Kong said weakly, thank you, father. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, what happened last night? Do you remember? Did you see the man's face clearly? King Kong shook his head and said, after leaving the palace last night, I returned home alone. When I passed a dark alley, someone rushed out of the alley, stabbed me with a knife and rushed into the crowd. He was masked, so I didn't see his face clearly. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, have you offended anyone recently, or are you suspicious of anyone? King Kong looked into his eyes, smiled helplessly, and said, no. After a pause, he said again, father, after my injury is healed, I will return to my fiefdom, and I will not stay in the capital to cause trouble to you. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, I asked you to stay in the capital, so you stay in the capital. I want to see if some people are so bold that they are lawless. He walked out of the hall and stopped when he reached a corridor. He looked ahead and asked, do you think this was done by Prince Duan, or was it a self-torture trick by Prince Kong? No one responded for a long time. He looked back at Wei Jian and said angrily, I'm asking you a question. Are you deaf? Wei Jian raised his head, looked at him in surprise, and asked, did your majesty say anything just now? Your ears are really problematic. Emperor Chen looked at him angrily, and finally waved his hand. Thinking of the situation just now, he said in a deep voice, Chen's expression doesn't seem fake. I can't see any flaws. It shouldn't be him. And according to the imperial physician, if the knife had been half an inch to the left, his life would have been gone. He couldn't take such a big risk to frame Ming-er, not to mention that he could have just said who he suspected. He thought for a while, looked at Wei Jian, and said, announce Prince Duan to the palace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 657. Prince Duan's Mansion. King Duan knew the news of King Kang's assassination last night, but what this brought him was not a surprise, but a sleepless night. Everyone knows who the most hopes something will happen to King Kong and who most hopes King Kong will die. But what happened last night was not done by him at all. Although he wanted to solve all future troubles once and for all, he was not brave enough to be in the presence of the emperor of the capital. The problem is that others don't believe it. Rumors have spread in Beijing that he secretly instigated the assassination of King Kong. It is easy to prove a person's guilt, but it is more difficult than climbing to the sky to prove his innocence. Prince Duan was walking around the palace when a man stepped forward and said, this matter has touched His Majesty's bottom line. No matter what happens, please don't admit it. What do I admit? King Duan looked at him and said angrily, I did not instigate this matter. What do I need to admit? The counselor looked at him with admiration and said, yes, that's it. Even if you do it, you can't admit it. You must behave like this in front of your majesty. Even his own advisors didn't believe him. King Duan gave him a cold look and said angrily, get out. As soon as he finished speaking, a eunuch's voice came from outside the door, Your Majesty, King Duan, Your Majesty has summoned. King Duan's face turned pale, and he finally gritted his teeth and strode out. In the imperial study room, Prince Duan walked into the palace, looked at Emperor Chen who was standing inside, and bowed, My son, please see your father. Chen Huang turned to look at him and asked, Have you heard about Prince Kang's assassination? I heard about it. King Duan raised his head and said seriously, this thief is so bold and his crimes are so heinous. My father will never tolerate him. Unless Ling Chi can't restore the majesty of the royal family. Do you really think so? Chen Huang looked at him and said, I have heard some rumors. King Duan's expression changed and he said, Father is the king of a country and must not be used by some rumors with ulterior motives. Emperor Chen glanced at him and asked, what if it was King Kong who said it? King Duan's expression changed drastically, and he immediately said, Father, Brother Kong Wang may have some misunderstandings with Er Chen. I hope Father will believe that Er Chen did not do this. Chen Huang walked up and said, Prince Kong didn't say who did this, nor did he doubt you. Why are you so nervous? He turned back, glanced at King Duan again, and said, I told you that an emperor must learn to be incompetent, but that is for outsiders. To be an emperor, you must first learn to be a human being. When he said the latter sentence, his expression became stern. King Duan lowered his head, gritted his teeth and said, My son, please remember your father's teachings. After a while, Prince Duan exited the imperial study. The moment he turned around, his face completely darkened. Although there was no storm in the royal study just now, he felt that this incident would definitely cause him to suffer losses again. Obviously, his father had already blamed him for the assassination of King Kong. If King Kong was not the heir, his status would also be extraordinary. He would never be so calm just now. This situation of being passively affected without doing anything made him extremely depressed and angry. He clenched his fists tightly, with fire in his eyes, and hissed, Who is harming me? 2 days have passed since King Kong was assassinated, and there are still no clues at all. During the great court meeting, the court had many things to deal with, and it was impossible for Emperor Chen to focus all his energy on King Kong. This matter seemed to have disappeared without any news, but in fact, someone still smelled something unusual from the clues. Emperor Chen originally assigned the imperial examination to Prince Duan, but the examiner was quietly replaced by Fang Hong, the Minister of Civil Affairs. Prince Duan was relegated to the cold palace just a few days after he was proud. On the contrary, the seriously injured King Kong was left in the palace, and King Kang's palace received many rewards. In addition, Emperor Chen also selected 100 elite soldiers from the Yulin Guards to be responsible for King Kang's safety. It has to be said that the misfortune was everything in the end. King Kong relied on selling misfortune, except that he did not regain the position of the prince. At present, the degree of favor in front of Emperor Chen is no less than that of Prince Duan, and even temporarily exceeds it. Of course, it was only temporary. Emperor Chen was just dissatisfied with Wang Duan's approach of attacking his own brother. He seemed to be very sensitive to this kind of thing, and he didn't know if he had any psychological impact on it. The last time King Kong knelt down, King Duan sat still for a full time. After 3 months of being on the bench, King Kong was stabbed directly this time. He didn't know how long he would be relegated to the cold palace. Tang Ning didn't know whether this was King Kang's trick or King Duan's plan to wipe out the family. The Ping'an County government seemed to have found something. The court searched for a person with such a big fanfare, but finally found some clues. When the government officials followed the clues to arrest people, they found that the target of their trip, a rogue idler from the capital, had his neck hanged in his own home. He may also know that if he falls into the hands of the imperial court, death will become a luxury for him. Not everyone can bear the feeling of being cut 3,600 times and not being allowed to die. The clues were completely cut off at this point. No one knew who was instigating this rogue. The Ping'an County government handed over these clues, and no information came from it. Tang family. In the past few months, King Kong was defeated, King Duan was favored, King Duan was ignored, King Duan was favored again, and then ignored. The Tang family has experienced ups and downs several times with King Duan, and by now, it has become somewhat numb. King Kong was injured, and Prince Duan was once again banished to the cold palace by His Majesty. It was unknown when he would be re-employed. In the study of the Tang mansion, Tang Hui drank tea slowly and not in a hurry. Tang Chi sat aside, silent for a long time, and said, King Kong himself could not come up with such an idea. I am afraid that the surname Su cannot be trusted. Tang Hui put down the teacup and said, the same trick happened once or twice, but not a third time. Tang Chi nodded and said, Your Majesty is still thinking about Prince Duan, otherwise, this matter would not be so light. Tang Hui asked, I heard that someone found a clue. A scoundrel who committed suicide out of fear of crime. Tang Chi shook his head and said, What a pity, if we continue to investigate, we may be able to clear the suspicion. Tang Hui asked, Do you think that the surname Su would leave such an obvious flaw? Tang Chi raised his head and asked, Brother, what do you mean? Tang Hui stood up and said slowly, I always feel a little uneasy. Tang Chi said, What's uneasy? Tang Hui looked at him and asked, Have you found out the details of that rascal? I've asked someone to check it. Tang Chi had just finished speaking when a servant came in, looked at him with a pale face, and said, Master, I have found out some details about that rascal. Tang Chi stared at him and asked, What details? The servant glanced at him and whispered, That rascal, used to be with the young master for a while. Hearing this, Tang Hui and Tang Chi both changed their expressions at the same time. In Tang Zhao's room, Tang Zhao was about to go out when he saw his father and uncle coming in from outside at the same time, staring at him intently. He couldn't help but tremble and said nervously, Why are you looking at me? Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 658. Tang Chi looked at Tang Zhao and asked in a deep voice, Do you know Zhang Bin? Zhang Bin. Tang Zhao was startled when he heard this, and after thinking for a while, he said, It sounds familiar. Tang Chi said sternly, Do you know him? Tang Zhao shivered and said, I think I had such a person under my command before, but I haven't had any contact with him for at least 2 years. Tang Chi stared at him and asked, In other words, he was indeed under your command before? It seems. Don't seem. Tang Zhao shivered again in fear and said hurriedly, I am sure and certain that Zhang Bin was indeed under my command before. Tang Chi trembled, held the door, and closed his eyes in despair. Even the Tang family could find out that Zhang Bin was Tang Zhao's subordinate before, so how could the court not find out, and how could His Majesty not find out? His Majesty was gentle and mellow at Prince Duan's place because Prince Duan was his son. This gentle and mellow, when it came to the Tang family, it was very likely to be a storm. Tang Zhao looked at the two people with very bad faces and asked tentatively, Dad, Uncle, what happened? The imperial edict has arrived. Minister of Rights Tang Hui receives the edict. As soon as Tang Zhao finished speaking, the eunuch's sharp and thin voice sounded outside the door. Tang Hui and Tang Chi looked at each other and walked out slowly. Tang Hui looked at the eunuch in front of him, calmly tidied his clothes, and knelt down and said, I receive the edict. Wei Jian stepped forward, unfolded the imperial edict in his hand, and read, The edict says, I inherited the unique learning from the hundreds of saints, and explored the subtle words in the 6 classics. I will rise from this culture and remember the old people. Although the rituals and punishments are unseen, there are still simple policies to seek. Minister of Rights Tang Hui, in addition to the position of Minister of Rights, specially awarded the title of Prince Shaoxi, respect it. This imperial edict is very long, but most of the content is the official documents of the ceremony. The only really useful ones are the last few sentences. Minister of Rights Tang Hui, in addition to the position of Minister of Rights, specially awarded the title of Prince Shaoxi. As the name implies, only the prince's teacher can receive such an honor. The prince's teacher is a second-rank official. The highest official position in the capital that holds real power is only the second rank. The positions higher than the prince's teacher, such as the Grand Tutor and the Grand Master, are all honorary positions, of course, including the prince's teacher. This position is generally given posthumously by the court to those officials with great qualifications after retirement or death. Tang Huai's qualifications are not up to this level. If there is no previous sentence except the position of Shangshu, this is a great honor for the Tang family. With this sentence, the meaning is completely different. Although he was given a second-rank honorary position, he was kicked out of the Ministry of Rites. One is a real position and the other is an honorary title. There is no need to say which is more important. This is His Majesty's punishment for the Tang family. Since then, the Tang family has only a negligible influence in the court, which is less than 1/10 of its heyday 3 years ago. Wei Jian looked at Tang Huai, who was kneeling on the ground, sighed lightly, and said, "Lord Tang, please accept the order." Tang Huai raised his hands and said in a deep voice, "Minister, thank your Majesty for your grace." Wei Jian nodded and said, "The imperial edict has been delivered, and we have to return to the palace to report." Tang Huai stood up and said with a smile, "Send it to Eunuch Wei." "No need to trouble you." Wei Jian waved his hand and turned away. Tang Huai held the imperial edict tightly. Tang Zhao got up from the ground and said happily, "My uncle was appointed as the prince's tutor. Why did my cousin Prince Duan become the prince?" "Shut up," Tang Qi glared at him sternly and asked, "When was the last time Zhang Bin contacted you?" Tang Zhao touched his head in confusion and said, "That was 2 years ago." "What happened?" Tang Huai put away the imperial edict and sighed, "What a good plan." Tang Qi clenched his fist unwillingly. From now on, the Tang family has passively withdrawn from the court and can only rely on Prince Duan alone. He looked at Tang Huai and asked, "Is it Prince Kong, Prince Huai, or Tang Ning?" "It doesn't matter." Tang Huai shook his head and said, "Some people don't want me to enter the East Palace smoothly, but they forget that the Tang family is not their opponent, but your Majesty is." Tang Qi said, "But your Majesty still regards the Tang family as an opponent. In the past few years, everyone in the capital has witnessed your Majesty's suppression of the Tang family. This time, as long as they investigate carefully, the Tang family can clear the suspicion," but he directly issued an imperial edict to completely knock the Tang family down. Tang Huai waved his hand and said, "The process is not important, the result is important." Although Tang Qi looked unwilling, he could do nothing about it. "If your Majesty did it on purpose, it would be futile for the Tang family to do too much. Only when Prince Duan came to power, the Tang family would have a chance to rise again. No matter what tricks those villains behind the scenes use, Prince Duan's coming to power is an unchangeable fact. If anyone wants to change it, they must face the emperor directly." Thinking of this, Tang Qi suddenly expected those people to make another move. Tang Zhao looked at him in confusion and asked, "Dad, what happened to King Kong, what happened to King Huai, and what happened to Tang Ning?" "Shut up." Tang Qi glanced at him and said, "Go to the ancestral hall and kneel down." Tang Zhao looked at him and was speechless. He said in confusion, "Dad, can I ask you what I did wrong this time?" Tang Qi glared at him and said, "Kneel down when I told you to, why don't you go?" "I won't go." Tang Zhao stared at him and said angrily, "I didn't do anything, and you made me kneel. What a lousy head of the family. Who will be the head in the future? I won't be the head anymore, I'm going to Jiangnan." Tang Qi said angrily, "Whose father are you?" "I am my own father, can't I?" Tang Zhao said angrily as he walked out of the house, "I will leave if you let me go, and I will come back if you let me come back. Whatever happens is your fault. I don't want to serve you anymore." Royal Palace. Emperor Chen did not review memorials in the imperial study, nor rest in the palace of his beloved concubine. Instead, he walked alone in the imperial garden. Wei Jian walked over from behind and followed him slowly. Emperor Chen asked calmly, has the imperial edict been delivered? Wei Jian nodded and said, delivered. Chen Huang asked, what did he say? Wei Jian smiled and said, Master Tang said, thank you for your grace. It's good to be an emperor. Emperor Chen smiled and said, thank them for rewards and thank them for punishments. No wonder there are so many people vying to be emperor. He shook his head and added, we all see the benefits of being an emperor, but we don't see how much blood is shed and how many people die each time in order to fight for this position. He smiled with some disdain and said, what they are playing has been ruined by my royal brothers, so can't they come up with some new tricks? Wei Jian followed him, smiling and saying nothing. He walked in the imperial garden and said calmly, let the spies keep an eye on it. Whether someone is plotting to kill King Kong or someone is plotting against King Duan, as long as they take action again, they will definitely reveal their flaws. Wei Jian bowed and whispered, I obey the order. In Tanghuai, the position of Minister of Rites was removed and a prince was granted the title of Young Master. Although the official position of Prince's Young Master is respected, it is usually given to dead people. I don't know if Emperor Chen has any deep meaning in it. Tang Ning didn't know this. From the 3rd grade to the 2nd grade, people who don't understand may think that this is Emperor Chen's commendation to the Tang family, but people with a little common sense will know that Tang Huai has been ignored. The Ministry of Rites is the nominal head of the 6 departments. The position of the Minister of Rites is already respected and he still holds real power. However, the position of the Minister of Rites was removed and he was given a prince and young master who was of little use. If the Tang family had not made any major mistakes, Huang Chen could not possibly treat him like this. Someone with a quick mind has connected this matter with the assassination of King Kong, strung it into a story, and deduced many versions, which spread in the capital. Regardless of whether these rumors and stories are true or false, there is one fact that everyone agrees on. The once prosperous and extremely prominent Tang family has fallen into decline. No matter whether the Tang family will make a comeback after King Duan comes to power, at least for now, the decline of the Tang family is a fact. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 659. Tang Ning looked at the recent events with a pessimistic attitude. Regardless of whether the assassination of King Kong was caused by King Duan or King Huai, or whether King Kong directed and performed a good show with the purpose of dragging King Duan into the water, the ending of the matter was good. After the defeat of King Kong, King Duan did not take the position of prince, but was benched one after another. King Kong, who had become the heir, actually won 2 games in a row in front of King Duan. While King Duan was treated coldly, however, he lived in the palace and was served by the palace maids and eunuchs. Prince Kang's palace also had a tendency of resurgence. The credit that was originally attributed to King Duan was in vain to gain the advantage of King Huai and Fang Hong. Zhao Yuan's cooking skills became more and more sophisticated, which undoubtedly tied Chen Wang's stomach and completed the first step of overtaking in a corner. Things are moving in a good direction. This year has just passed and before the Yuan dynasty, Tang Ning has to prepare for the women's martial arts competition again. After March, the Ministry of Civil Affairs and many officials in the court will be busy with the provincial and imperial civil examinations. The court pays special attention to this year's martial arts examinations, so Tang Ning plans to hold the women's martial arts examinations 1 month ahead of time, which coincides with these 2 major events. Open. Including the Jiangyi area, the examination lists of each state have been reported. With so many state capitals in Chen State, there are only about 500 women participating in the martial arts examination. This number was also within Tang Ning's expectation. After all, there are very few men who practice martial arts, let alone women. It is extremely difficult for the entire Chen kingdom to find 500 women who can read and write and practice martial arts since childhood. Tang Yaoyao and Xiao Xiao insisted on joining in the fun. Tang Yejing threatened them with his fatal blow, but Tang Ning had no choice but to agree. There is no problem with the identities of the two of them. Although Tang Yejing is the daughter of a businessman, she is now a member of the Tang family. Tang Ning, who has a small household registration, has already registered for her, and she is now considered a daughter of a general. Emperor Chen launched a unified women's martial arts competition this time. In fact, it was just for the sake of face, and in the end only 10 captains were given places. Hundreds of people are competing for these 10 captains, and it is not easy to stay until the end. Prince Huai was the chief examiner of the martial arts examination, and Tang Ning wanted to show him the specific regulations. Early this morning, he had them delivered to Prince Huai's mansion. The fall of the Tang family and the cold reception by King Duan was a happy thing, but Tang Ning couldn't be happy about it. Because Su Mei is leaving. In 2 months, she will go to Guizhou province with Beijing Gongsun Ying to participate in the competition for the Saint of Wangu sect. Once she leaves, Tang Ning will not be able to see her for at least a year. Tang Ning was sitting in the study when Su Mei came over and said with a smile, "Isn't there still 2 months left?" Tang Ning sighed and said, 2 months, only 60 days, and 720 hours, what can I do? Su Mei sat in his arms and asked with a smile, "You don't know what 60 days and 720 hours can do." Of the 4 ladies, she was the one who knew how to pester people best. Tang Ning really loved and feared her, but at this time, he didn't have any other thoughts. He hugged her gently and said, "Let you suffer." These days, she was training with Gongsun Ying and Baijian, and she returned exhausted almost every day. This matter was originally supposed to be done by Tang Ning, but she took it on without any explanation, leaving him no room for negotiation. "It's not bitter." Su Mei leaned on his shoulder and said, "This time it's for ourselves, it's not bitter at all. Time is relative. The 2 months and 720 hours that Su Mei spent at home will pass in a blink of an eye. But if she leaves for 2 months, these 720 hours will be like 7,200 or 70,000. 2,000. Tang Ning sent another letter to Prince Huai's mansion today. The content of the letter was very polite, but there was only one central idea. In the month before the martial arts examination begins, he should spend time with his wife. Don't bother him if there is nothing important. Don't bother him with important things. In the palace of Prince Huai. After reading Tang Ning's letter, King Huai shook his head helplessly, put down the letter, put a piece of pastry in front of the young woman opposite, and said, "Try the lily cake you like." The young woman smiled softly, put some fish in his bowl, and said softly, "You eat this." A maid came in from outside and whispered, "Your Highness, a guest is here." King Huai slowly swallowed the food in his mouth and asked, "What guest?" The maid said, "He said he was an old friend of His Highness." King Huai nodded and said, "Let him wait in the study. I will be there in a moment." The young woman looked at him and said, "If the prince has something to do, please go there first. Don't delay anything important." "What important thing can I do?" King Huai smiled and said, "What thing is more important than having dinner with the princess?" The woman lowered her head and smiled, but said nothing more. King Huai slowly finished the meal with the young woman, wiped his mouth with the handkerchief handed over by the woman, stood up and said, "I'll be back as soon as I can." He walked out of the room, walked slowly to the study, and closed the door. He looked at the figure hidden under the cloak in the study and asked, "Did you do the assassination of King Kong?" "I thought it was you who did it." An unidentified voice came from under the cloak, and said slowly, "Killing King Kong, framing King Duan, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, the snipe and the clam fighting, the fisherman profiting, it looks very much like your handiwork." King Huai looked calm and asked, "Do you know me well?" The voice said, "For so many years, haven't you liked to be the fisherman who benefits? It seems that Brother Kong Wang is really different from before." King Huai slowly walked to the table and sat down, saying, "This self-torture plan is to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, dragging Prince Duan and the Tang family into the water at the same time. "Are you talking about King Kong?" The figure looked at him and said puzzledly, "King Kong is just a straw bag. Is there a master behind him?" King Huai did not answer this question. He looked at him and said, "You haven't come here for a long time. I thought you were dead." "I won't die so easily." The figure looked at him and said, "At least I can't die before you ascend the throne." He looked at King Huai and said, "Speaking of this, when King Kong leaves the palace, you might as well find someone to give him its grade. If King Kong dies, it will make the emperor suspicious of Prince Duan. Wouldn't that be beneficial to you?" King Huai said calmly, "Don't teach me how to do things. I'm not here to teach you how to do things." The man looked at him through his cloak and said, "I'm here to tell you that I'm going to be away for a while. During this time, you should take care of yourself. Don't wait for me to come back. You have fallen to the same situation as King Kong." King Huai looked at him and asked, "Are you worried that your efforts over the years will go to waste?" The figure looked at him and said, "Worry more about yourself. The emperor has obviously decided on Prince Duan's position as the crown prince. It's not that easy to snatch food from the tiger's mouth." The young woman knocked on the door of the study, pushed it open, and saw King Huai standing by the wall, admiring the calligraphy and paintings on the wall. She looked around and said in confusion, "The guest has left." King Huai turned around and said with a smile, "Gone." The woman walked up to her and said, "I want to go back to my parents' home in the next 2 days." "I'll take you back." King Huai nodded and said with a smile, "It's been a long time since I had a drink with my father-in-law." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 660. Before the Lantern Festival, Tang Ning had not finished his annual leave, but he was summoned to the Ministry of Personnel again for something. This time, there was a major event, and as the Minister of Personnel, he could not be absent. Emperor Chen had dismissed Tang Huai from the position of Minister of Rites. Now that the imperial examination was approaching, another person had to be selected as soon as possible to take charge of the Ministry of Rites. Although the power of the Ministry of Rites had been cut again and again by Emperor Chen, it was still necessary to save face. At this critical moment, it was not decent for the position of Minister of Rites to be vacant. In the past, when a chief official of a department was vacant, the court would naturally consider the second in command who was familiar with the affairs of the department first. However, Lu Feng, the former Minister of Rites, had long been exiled to another state because of his lifestyle problems. Now the Minister of Rites is temporarily held by the Hanlin Academy, and the Hanlin Academy is too busy to handle it. Moreover, with the qualifications of Zhou Sushi, he is not qualified for the position of minister. Zhou Sushi's qualifications are not enough, so those Lang Zhong in the Ministry of Rites are naturally not considered. Therefore, the new Minister of Rites must be selected from other departments. This person's official position cannot be lower than the 4th rank, and he must have a certain degree of qualifications in the court, which is in line with the promotion process of Beijing officials. The Ministry of Personnel has already screened, and there are not many people who meet these two requirements. There are only a few officials of the 3rd rank, each of whom is the head of a department. Transferring them here is like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Besides, which of the 6 departments is not more important than the Ministry of Rites? Let alone the 3rd rank, there are no extra 3rd rank officials in Beijing. The imperial censor, the Supreme Court minister, etc. are also heads of a department and are not easy to transfer. From the 4th rank to the 3rd rank, this is the court's official selection habit. This is exactly the advancement path from the assistant minister to the minister, from the adjutant to the chief officer. If there is any potential official, Chen Huang will put him in the 4th rank instead of the 3rd rank. Moreover, According to convention, whether it is the Zongshu Mengxia, Shangshu Dushan, or important departments such as the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Revenue, and the Ministry of War, there are 2 adjutants of the 4th rank. Transferring one will not affect the operation of the department, and it will also make room for the next person. When Tang Ning walked into the Ministry of Personnel, a guard bowed and said, "Sir Tang, the minister is waiting for you in the yamen." The last time Tang Ning met Shifei in the palace, they had actually decided something during the few words of casual chat. I think Fang Hong already knew it at this moment. The position of the Minister of Rights was decided by 2 people with ulterior motives, which made Tang Ning feel like they were in cahoots with each other. Tang Ning walked into the Shangshu Yamen, bowed to Fang Hong, and said, "Sir Fang." "Sir Tang, you're welcome." Fang Hong bowed in return, poured a cup of tea himself, and said, "Sir Tang, please sit down." After Tang Ning sat down, he handed a letter to Tang Ning and said, "This is the list of candidates for the Minister of Rights drafted by the Ministry of Personnel. Sir Tang, please take a look." Tang Ning opened the letter. Many of the names on it were unfamiliar to him. He had only been in the 6 ministries in recent years and was not familiar with officials from the 3 provinces and other departments. He looked at the person at the front and asked, "Who is this Lord Shen yet?" Fang Hong said, "Lord Shen is the Imperial Secretary, serving in the Ministry of Personnel." Tang Ning looked at Fang Hong and asked, "Does Lord Shen have any friendship with Lord Fang?" Fang Hong looked at Tang Ning and said a little embarrassedly, "Lord Shen and I are both Jinchi in the same year, and we have a good personal relationship." The 2 brothers of the Fang family have completely different personalities. Fang Zhe is the type of person who is not afraid of boiling water, while Fang Hong is a bit more straightforward. However, since Zhao Yuan is planning to compete for the position, even if Fang Hong is a very upright person, it would be stupid if he does not pave the way for him in the future. But paving the way also requires methods. If it were Fang Zhe, he would never do it so obviously. In the list of the Ministry of Personnel, the first person is naturally the one who is strongly recommended. Unless Emperor Chen is dissatisfied with him, he will generally not choose another one, but he will consider many things, including the party and relatives of this person, so this person must be selected with great caution. Tang Ning looked at him, shook his head, and said, "Although it is said that one should not avoid enemies when recommending people from outside, and relatives when recommending people from within, there may be people gossiping behind your back. Lord Fang should not put him first, otherwise even His Majesty will have some thoughts in his mind." Fang Hong blushed slightly, lowered his head, and said, "What do you think, Lord Tang?" "No hurry." Tang Ning waved his hand, looked at the second name, and asked, "Who is this Qi Long?" Fang Hong explained, "Lord Qi is the minister of the Ministry of Shangshu, and has been in office for more than 10 years, and his reputation is very good." Tang Ning asked directly, "What is his relationship with the Fang family?" Fang Hong said, "They are just nodding acquaintances. The position of the Minister of Rights is not very useful, but at critical moments, it can give him more say, so it is natural to arrange his own people to feel at ease." Since the goal of seizing the throne has been established, Tang Ning and Fang Hong don't need to beat around the bush when talking. A close friend cannot be chosen, otherwise it will arouse the suspicion of Emperor Chen. This must not happen before Zhao Yuan has the strength to seize the throne. People with no relationship cannot be chosen either, otherwise it will be a waste of this opportunity. But after Fang Hong introduced the people on the list to him one by one, Tang Ning found that except for Lord Shen, the rest of the people had no deep friendship with the Fang family. If this is the case, it will not be easy to arrange the position of Minister of Rights to Lord Shen quietly. Tang Ning frowned slightly, looked at the last person's name, and asked, "Zhang Yan, this name sounds familiar, which lord in the court is it?" Fang Hong said, "Master Zhang is the vice minister of Zongshu and the son of Zhang Dajin. However, the Fang family and the Zhang family have never had any contact." Wait a minute. Tang Ning raised her hand to interrupt Fang Hong and asked, how many bachelors named Zhang are there in the court? Fang Hong thought for a while and said, just one person. Tang Ning pointed to Zhang Yan's name and said, it's him. Royal Study Room. Emperor Chen opened the book handed over by the official department, with a slightly strange expression on his face, and said, I thought he would put Shen Ye first. After all, they were Jinchi in the same year and had a pretty good personal relationship. Unexpectedly, he actually put Shen Ye first the end. He looked at the name ranked first and asked, who is Zhang Yan? It sounds familiar. Wei Jiandao, Your Majesty, Mr. Zhang is the son of a great scholar Zhang, and he is currently serving in the Zhongshu province. It turns out to be the Zhang family, Emperor Chen said with a look of surprise on his face. The Zhang family has always kept a low profile as officials, and I have no impression of the dignified secretariat and minister. Wei Jian smiled and said, Master Zhang has a strict upbringing, and the Zhang family keeps a low profile. Your Majesty has forgotten that back then, Master Zhang punished His Majesty for reciting it. His Majesty couldn't recite it and was punished, so he went to the late emperor to complain. Thinking of the past events, Chen Huang shook his head, with a smile on his face, and said, no wonder, he is the son of Zhang University, so it's not surprising. Fang Yiking is as calm as ever in his work. Chen Huang thought for a while and said, the Zhang family knows etiquette and observes etiquette, so it would be better for him to go to the Ministry of Etiquette to save time in Zhongshu. That position is more suitable for him, and let the Hanlin Academy draft just do it. Wei Jian bowed and said, I obey the order. He slowly exited the hall and happened to meet Zhao Yuan, who personally delivered soup to Emperor Chen. Wei Jian paused, suddenly looked at Zhao Yuan, and asked in a low voice, why haven't you seen the little girl from the Zhang family following His Highness recently? Zhao Yuan glanced at his mouth and said, that's because you didn't see it. I was playing with Sister Zhang yesterday. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 661. Shuxiu Palace. Bookmark our website. Concubine Shu held a piece of paper in her hand and frowned. There was a list of names written on this piece of paper, which were the candidate officials drafted by the Ministry of Rights this time. Shen Ye's name was written at the first one. No, Big Brother was reckless this time. A trace of anxiety appeared on Concubine Shu's face. She looked behind her and said, you should leave the palace immediately and send a message to Fang Shangshu on my behalf, saying that the Ministry of Personnel must not recommend Shen Ye to be the Minister of Rights. The Shen family and the Fang family are close friends. She can understand her eldest brother's intention to increase the bargaining chip for King Run, but this is too obvious. Once His Majesty thinks of something based on this, their plan will be aborted just after it has begun. Middle. Right now, it is definitely not an opportunity for King Run to walk from the back to the front. Zhao Yuan shook her head and walked in from the door, looked at Concubine Shu, and asked doubtfully, Concubine, the Minister of Rights is Zhang Yan, who is Shen Ye? Concubine Fang Shu was stunned, looked at him suspiciously, and asked, how do you know that the Minister of Rights is Zhang Yan? I just came from my father's place. I heard what my father said. Zhao Yuan looked at Concubine Fang Shu and said in surprise, Concubine, who is Zhang Yan? Why does it sound familiar? Zhang Yan is the father of your Zhang family, sister Fang Shifei explained, picked up the paper in her hand, and looked at it again. Zhang Yan's name was listed last. According to common sense, the position of the Minister of Rights is so different. It's not his turn. Could it be that the order of the list submitted by the Ministry of Rights has been adjusted? Zhao Yuan said happily, has your father-in-law been promoted? Who is your father-in-law? Fang Shifei glanced at him angrily and said, at such a young age, from whom did I learn these words, and I am half-hearted about girls. Mr. He, Zhao Yuan said confidently, there are 5 mistresses in your family. I only have sisters from the Wang family, Zhang family, and Bai family. There are still 2 more to go. Concubine Fang Shu looked at him and asked, don't you have only 4 ladies in your family? Zhao Yuan's expression was stunned, and he knew that he had let slip just now and almost confessed the imperial sister. He rolled his eyes and said with a naive smile, Sir, there are only 4 mistresses. I remembered it wrong. Fortunately, concubine Fang Shu didn't argue with him about this. She looked at him and asked seriously, did you really hear my father say that the new Minister of Rights is the father of the Zhang family's sister? Zhao Yuan took out something from her arms, handed it to concubine Fang Shu, and said, Concubine, you will know by yourself. Fang Shufei looked at a strange paper-like object in her hand and wondered, what is this? My teacher taught me how to fold this little frog, Zhao Yuan said, put it on the ground, press its butt, and it will jump forward. If you want to see it, I will let you see it. Fang Shufei shook her head and asked, what does this have to do with Sister Zhang's father? Zhao Yuan took apart the paper art and said, this is the paper my father gave me when I folded the little frog for him just now. I saw my father-in-law's name on it. Although Fang Shufei was amused that the father and son were actually playing with memorials, she was pleased with their lack of scruples. After taking it apart, she saw the list of candidates for the Minister of Rights submitted by the Ministry of Personnel. Zhang Yan's name was impressive. Listed first. She looked at the paper in her hand and said in surprise, why has it changed? Zhao Yuan looked up at her and said, Mother, I want to go out of the palace to play with the Zhang family sister. Fang Shufei gave him a dissatisfied look and said, what are you playing for? Have you finished your homework for today? Zhao Yuan looked at her and said innocently, Sir, he said that there was a lot of fun at Zhang's sister's house, so he asked me to join in the fun. Sir, Fang Shufei murmured, and a bright light suddenly flashed in her mind. She breathed a sigh of relief and murmured, no wonder. Based on her understanding of her eldest brother, he would never have imagined this, but she forgot that besides Fang Hong, there was also Tang Ning in the staff department. If he hadn't been here this time, maybe something good would have turned into something bad, and even their plan would have failed halfway. She looked at Zhao Yuan, who was taking out a book to read, and asked, what are you doing? Zhao Yuan said in surprise, you asked me to study. Concubine Fang Shu took the book from his hand, threw it aside, and said, stop studying and go play with your Zhang sister. From now on, whatever your husband says will be whatever you say, just listen to him. Zhang family. The Zhang family in the capital is famous for its poetry and calligraphy, and has countless disciples. Each generation has been appointed as a bachelor. It is a famous noble family in Beijing. Although the position of grand scholar does not hold real power and does not participate in court affairs, its status is extremely respected. Everyone from the common people to the courtiers respects him very much. It was the Zhang family's luncheon at this time. Everyone was eating slowly, no one was talking, and no one was making too much noise. At a certain moment, a servant walked in from outside and whispered, Sir, His Royal Highness Prince Run is here. During the dinner, a pretty little girl put down her chopsticks, looked at an old man in front of her, and whispered, Grandpa, I'm done eating. Academician Zhang nodded and said, Go. Although the rules of the Zhang family are that the younger ones are not allowed to leave until the elders leave the table, but if the little girl does not go out, if King Run is invited in, all of them will have to stand up and salute, which will be troublesome. King Run Zhao Yuan often comes to the Zhang family, and the Zhang family is not surprised by this. After dinner, the servants cleaned up the leftovers of the bowls and chopsticks. The old man wiped his mouth, glanced at a middle-aged man below, and asked casually, Your Majesty wants to appoint the Minister of Rights again. Who is the one recommended by the Secretariat? The middle-aged man said, It's my son. The Secretariat is responsible for drafting and issuing imperial edicts. The former has become the job of the Hanlin Academy many years ago. The Secretariat of Chen State is just an institution that issues decrees and imperial edicts. It does not participate in court affairs. Most of them are noble officials. The Ministry of Rights is actually the same. After even the affairs of the imperial examination were transferred to the Ministry of Personnel, it completely became a noble place. However, the Ministry of Rights is still the head of the 6 ministries in name. The power of the Minister of Rights is not great, but his status in the hearts of scholars and even officials is half a level higher than that of the ministers of other ministries. If the Zhang family can produce another Minister of Rights in addition to the Grand Secretary, then they will stand at the top of the kingly family. However, there are still many officials in the court with more seniority and ability than Zhang Yan. No one can get this position. This time, it is just to fill the number. The old man looked at him and said, "The Secretariat is not much worse than the Ministry of Rights. You are still young, so it is good to hone your skills more." The middle-aged man did not hold any hope in his heart, and nodded, "I understand." Zhang's family, in the back garden. Zhao Yuan picked a flower casually, handed it to the little girl with both hands, and said, "For you." The little girl was about to take it, but he suddenly said, "I will help you put it on your head. This flower must look good on your head." The little girl blushed and said, "Okay then." Zhao Yuan put the little flower on the little girl's head, stared at her, and smiled innocently, "It looks good." The little girl squinted and said, "Not as pretty as the Wang family sister and the Bai family sister. They have their own beauty, you have yours, you are all beautiful." Zhao Yuan saw that the little girl seemed to be about to speak again, hurriedly changed the subject and said, "I came here today to congratulate you, your father is going to be the Minister of Rights." "Liar." The little girl pouted at him and said, "Dad said that he can't be the minister." Zhao Yuan looked at her and asked, "Do you dare to bet?" The little girl said, "What bet?" Zhao Yuan thought for a while and said, "If your father becomes the Minister of Rights, you kiss me." The little girl blushed and pouted, "What if not?" Zhao Yuan smiled silly and said, "Then I will kiss you." The little girl looked at him and nodded hesitantly. "Don't cheat." Zhao Yuan looked at her, stretched out his little finger, and said, "Pink." The little girl stretched out her little finger and hooked it with him, saying, "Pink."